Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Hey, Tom, we just start the broadcast. We're waiting for Captain Corey Chase. We have David Trinidad here from Miami-Dade.
Okay, hi, David.
Our listeners are just joining us now.
Okay, very good.
David, yeah, there you go. For those of you who are just joining us, feel free to use your chat to say hi, let us know where you're calling from. We'll get started in just a minute.
David, where is your office?
Downtown Miami.
Downtown Miami. Okay. You guys fared okay through Aviation?
Oh, you know, it's just the first one. I mean, we're numb to them. We're just numb at this point.
I gotta believe that Floridians are like, okay, here we go again.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a Cat 3 or higher to get our attention.
It's a sad state of affairs, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I heard this morning that Sandy, when it hit ground, was only a Cat 1.
Yeah,
I was stunned. I was really surprised when I heard that one.
Hey, Captain Chase, how are you? Can you hear me, Corey?
Yep, I can now.
Oh, there you go.
Hi,
All
Corey.
right, we have our participants here, and I just wanted to say hi to Elizabeth, or Liz, who's the Emergency Manager, City and County of Denver. We also have Carolyn Bloom from CERT Ministry. And there's a couple people just chatting to say hi. Welcome to everyone else who's on the line. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're waiting for one more panelist, but he did let us know he's just going to be a minute late. So for the sake of time, let me go ahead and start with some administrative remarks. First of all, welcome to the All Hazards Consortium's Business Resiliency Virtual Discussion Series. This one focused on how COVID-19 has affected aviation and aviation security. I've met some of you before. I'm Laura Johnson. I'm the Director of Conferences and Events for the All Hazards Consortium. I just wanted to remind everyone that we are recording today's discussion. We will share that link with you post-event so that you can share that with your colleagues or peers or watch it again. Also, you've all been muted, but we will have some time at the end of today's discussion to get some any questions that you might have for our panelists. And now I'd just like to introduce our Executive Director, Tom Moran. Tom?
Hi, thank you, Laura. Hey, folks, welcome to this. I forgot which number this is, Laura, but we've been doing a business resilience series. You know, one of the things that anybody who's been around disasters for a while realizes that there's a thing called lessons learned, and many times they're learned but forgotten. So one of the things we're trying to do is to capture, while it's still fresh, specific issues. So this is a big one. Aviation's a big one. People don't understand the impact aviation as a sector and a supply chain has on our nation. So I'm really, really happy that we can have David, Corey, and Robert on the phone with us today. This would probably just be the first of many future discussions, but the idea here was to look at this sector and get into the people that actually own the problem, pick their brains on what were the issues, what are they facing, how are they working around it, the innovations, partnerships, so forth. I love these because I learn a lot, as I'm sure you all will. So we're glad you all could come. And Laura, I'll turn it back up to you and get into this. You may, before I turn it back over, you may hear us mention the SICE. What is the SICE? The SICE is the private sector tool that was developed as a legal framework to protect information and identity as private sector shares information with government. It's an interesting concept that was developed in the electric sector in 2015 and now is spread to many other sectors. So it is a specific model to protect identity and information, to share data, information, dashboards, and things that are operational only. And some of it may only be shared for a day or two. Like we have several examples right now going on with the storm, where 3 sectors are watching one dashboard and no one else. So if you hear about the SICE, this is what it's in, and you can register for it for free. It's no cost at siceusa.org, and it's one of the underlying factions to how we work these resilience issues that are sensitive in nature sometimes. So, Laura, back to you. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Tom. I'd like to introduce today's panelists. On the discussion today, we have Captain Corey Chase with Port of Portland Police Department, David de Trinidad, the Assistant Chief of Security with the Miami-Dade Internal Services Department, and joining us in just a minute or two will be Rob Wheeler, who is the Vice President of Aviation and Maritime Ops for Allied Universal. So for those of you who've attended these virtual webinars in the past, you know that we ask a series of questions. So we're going to start with understanding the operational impacts. And I'm going to just ask, David, I'm going to start with you. If you can talk about, first introduce yourself, and then tell us what operational impacts that the pandemic had or is having on your airport, on your area, and what challenges you're facing.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm David de Trinidad. As it was stated, I'm the Assistant Chief of Miami-Dade County Internal Services. So operational impacts obviously has been substantial for our airport, and I'm going to assume for most others. Everything is driven by passenger volume. So we've had a significant decrease in passenger traffic, which has directly impacted, obviously, our airline partners, concessionaires, retailers, and our many other federal, state, and local agencies that we work closely with. And the biggest impact, obviously, is just the reduction. We're nowhere near what we're accustomed to or used to. And obviously, the financial impact is significant for everyone involved.
Mm-hmm.
All right, David, thank you so much. Captain Chase, I'm going to pose the same question to you first. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Corey Chase. I'm the captain of the Port of Portland Police Department out in Portland, Oregon. We're stationed out here at PDX, Portland International Airport. And I've been out here at this airport for almost 9 years. And in my role as the captain, I'm the second in command of our police department out here. Significant operational impacts, and as David just kind of alluded to, you know, the reduction in passenger volume in the airports, you know, impacts all aspects of it, including public safety. And so for us, one of the biggest operational impacts that we've had is our staffing challenges, and we've been forced to reduce staff. I'm fortunate to avoid layoffs because we had some vacant positions that weren't filled, but those positions were removed from our budget. So we've had to kind of take a look at how are we going to respond to calls for service during this pandemic, and what does COVID-19 mean for us in law enforcement and in public safety. And so we had a lot of questions and a lot of conversations back and forth with our partners at the fire department. Because as you know, the passenger volume is going to drop, but there's still a need for public safety and for emergency responders to get out there and to respond to emergency situations. And so how do we do that safely? So those are some of the biggest thing that we ran into challenge-wise is how do we do that safely, and how do we still go serve the public and take care of these emergency situations as they arise, and do that in a way that still keeps our staff healthy and safe as well. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, and under 1542, we still have, you know, obligations to, you know, respond and support the TSA operations, the screening operations at the checkpoints at the airport as well. So just all of those things, how it's impacted us significantly. So. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Captain. Rob, thanks for joining us. How are you
today?
Thank
you. Doing very well, thank you.
Hey, Rob, we just wanted to ask you to introduce yourself, and also if you can answer the question about how COVID has affected your company.
Absolutely. My name is Robert Wheeler. I'm the Vice President of Operations for our Aviation and Maritime footprint for Allied Universal. Currently in that portfolio, we have 43 airports that are subject to security programs, 19 seaports between our port authorities and cruise operations, which is lack of cruise operations right now. We deal with additional outside vendors, or the airlines in addition to the airports. Listening to Captain Chase and Mr. de Trinidad talking about the difference, obviously, from the airport operation, being a contractor vendor has played another unique, challenging role. Obviously, the integrity of the airport security program has to maintain strong. It's still, the FBI still says that our airports are the #1 target for potential terror that we have to keep up on. And so, as both these gentlemen had alluded to, is the post can't go uncovered. So inside the airport space, inside the actual security program space, we have not seen a reduction in staffing, except for when, like the captain said, when one of our officers gets affected. And then those who are around the officer who were infected have been going to quarantine. To our benefit, luckily, our landside officers, the ones that were out doing parking lot control and passenger control and keeping people off the curb line, we were able to utilize some of those positions that we cut back on to supplement inside the airport space. But we still saw a significant impact. The other major operational impact, I would say, for us as the contractor vendor was the immediate unplanned for change in the scope of work. We went from very strictly post-order scope of work to now we are doing more backfilling for law enforcement, the police department. You can't just come up with a police officer in the course of a few hours. And so we started doing more alarm type response. Some of the non-critical law enforcement that from the civilian side and from the private sector security side, we could do to supplement and assist our partners in both airport operations and airport police department. On the other side of the airport operations, you have your airlines, the other big part of the airports. And we do a significant amount of work with the airlines in making sure that the aircraft are secured and they have to be searched as they come in and as they depart, especially in the foreign aviation. And we went to zero foreign aviation. So essentially, and now we're seeing the operational impact is continuing to get worse, as we're calling it, I guess, COVID 2.0. And we've seen 3 or 4 of our foreign aviation partners that played major roles into both Mr. de Trinidad and Captain Chase's operations in their airports go bankrupt. And so now you have essentially another almost post 9/11 for the airlines, and that definitely is affecting us. So as far as our challenges on staffing, we pretty much stayed even keel because the scope of work that increased in that space, we were supplementing for different airports and different law enforcement agencies. But the scope of work is also non-security driven. So we were doing temperature checking all of a sudden and no one to this day really has an exact science on how that needs to be done and what the regulations are going to be. But so immediately we had to get into things that were outside of our wheelhouse, outside of our comfort zone. So I think those are some of our biggest impacts.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Rob. All right, next we're going to start with initiatives. And Captain Chase, I'll start with you on this question. How have you addressed the operational issues that COVID caused since the outbreak? What were the initiatives you took?
So we've had to kind of take a look at how we're deploying our resources and try to be more efficient and meet our basic objective, which is providing a response to the checkpoints, the TSA checkpoints inside the airport. But we also have some ancillary areas of responsibility, and so what we did is took our traditional patrol districts and kind of redefined them. So we're still able to provide mutual aid support to our partners close by and patrol some of the areas where our jurisdictions tend to cross. But we've focused our resources back closer to the airport so we can respond quicker and more efficiently. And so that was kind of one of the things that we did just to be able to provide the response necessary to continue to keep the airport safe. And then we also had to kind of redefine how we were going to schedule our staff because we are a 24/7 operation and we're essential first responders. One of the big considerations that we had is what happens if we do have ill in our police department here. How do we limit that exposure to the rest of the staff so we don't just completely shut down our entire department? So we changed the way we did our scheduling. We went from an 8-hour shift that had overlap and potential for cross-contamination to a 12-hour shift that eliminated exposure between the oncoming shift and the outgoing shift. So, and then, we had to look at our cleaning standards and those things. So, and those are directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we've also had to look at how we respond to calls for service and how we interact with the public, which is, it's a challenge for us because traditionally, especially in the law enforcement side of things, it's important for us to build relationships in the community and to be out there, have face-to-face conversations with folks. When people call for service, it's because they need help. They want to see somebody show up. And so, but on some of these lower priority calls and things that don't involve like, person-to-person crimes, we've had to kind of take a step back and do more phone contacts and things like that. So, and not put our officers in a position where they're exposed and potentially could, expose the rest of their shift, and therefore limit our ability to respond in an emergency situation.
Captain Chase, do you find that you and your staff's day is busier because there's a new health restrictions that are in people's minds and people have to follow, or is it less busy because there's less passengers?
It's a combination of both, right? It's less busy because in the traditional sense. So it's we're responding differently to different situations. So what normally you would think with only 3% of your passenger volume, where we were at our lowest point, that there wouldn't really be anything to do, but then there's other challenges, and there's been challenges related to educating the public on some of the health and safety initiatives that have been passed down from our governor. So and helping our concessionaires and our vendors and our airline tenants, everybody, so yeah, it's shifted our focus and shifted our work in a different direction.
That's a very friendly way of saying it, educating the public.
Hey, Corey, this is Tom. Let me pull on that thread for a minute.
Okay.
Anytime there's humans involved, right?
Right.
You have emotion, you have logic, and you have the combination of the two sometimes that come together and you're not sure what they mean. Has this put additional pressures on you? It's a question for everybody to push out messaging to the public that it's okay, that here's what we're doing, that
yes.
Here are there's so many factions to your sector, right? There's the public safety, then there's the flight ops, then there's the crew, then there's so many pieces to this. I was curious your thoughts about the pressures on messaging, right? And how you see that going forward over the next year.
We've had a lot of those discussions with our operations folks, our concession managers, and our airline tenants about messaging. And we've done a lot of messaging and a lot of, as I say, educating, because it is important. A lot of this stuff is new, so it's important for us to still be able to provide a level of customer service without coming across as just being, too heavy-handed, because it is new and people, just naturally have a lot of questions about what does this mean and why are we doing this and what's going on around me and how are you guys keeping me safe and is this safe to even be here? So a lot of discussions about messaging and putting just a lot of information out, using a bunch of different ways to do that as well, social media as well as just traditional signage and things like that. So
Yeah, it is different. We've never faced this as a nation, certainly. So thank you.
Thank you. Hey, David, how have you addressed the operational or financial issues, for that matter, that the pandemic has caused? What initiatives came out of Miami-Dade?
Well, once the outbreak happened, the main goal was to stay operational as safely as possible. So, like the captain said, we enhanced cleaning protocols. We installed plexiglass at all ticket counters, information counters, credentialing offices, right? Trying to keep exposure down, trying to minimize how much staff we lose, right? Because that has a huge impact on trying to stay operational. But not only that, we also have to be careful because we have a lot of staff that responds to things. So when you're responding, you're breaking the 6 feet social distancing protocol.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that they have all their personal protective equipment. We have to make sure they're wearing it. And that in itself is a huge undertaking because, now you're in the enforcement part of the initiative, right? So putting the initiatives in place is great, but if you don't enforce them, then you get into a situation where, okay. So, and that's been the challenge, and, it's staying consistent with it, not getting comfortable, and just addressing every single time that there's a lapse or some sort of, oversight. And that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, David, so Miami is a huge cruise ship hub, right? So what was the impact early in the pandemic when cruise ships were docking? You may have had infected passengers and you had to be transferred.
Well, the big issue when there's any issue with cruise ships is stranded passengers at the airport, right? So you have, at any given time, you can have a couple or you can have hundreds. And because there was a time where they weren't letting the ships dock here, and there were certain restrictions, or if they did let them dock, they wouldn't let people off. There was a lot of people that obviously, when you have plans, and most of those plans are vacation and fun, and all of a sudden they're abruptly canceled, you're not in a very good mood.
No.
and now, you're uncomfortable. You're stuck at an airport. On top of that, you're wearing masks. We're asking you to stay away from people. There's not a lot of options as far as, sitting at restaurants and doing all the things that we're accustomed to doing and that really we take for granted, right? Before this, we took getting a haircut for granted. And now it's, we look at things differently. So, but that's the biggest challenge, just helping those folks, whether it's, to find lodging, to try to get them to where they're headed, to try to be empathetic, understanding, but at the same time, keeping them safe and letting them understand that although we understand they're in a bad position, we still need them to cooperate and follow the rules.
That's right. Thanks, David. And Rob, you're in San Diego, so I'm guessing you're experiencing or have experienced some of the same, but how would you answer this particular question?
It's an interesting question. I'm also a former chief security officer for Holland America Line, where I sailed internationally. So I'm the cruise ship industry is very close to me. I'll give you two examples to answer that question, and then I'll go back to the original question for the panel. I'll give you two examples. One would be Broward County. In Broward County, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, we have a heavy security footprint through our company in both the maritime and the aviation and overall transportation sector. So when those ships came in, we were already in the process of coordinating with the Broward County aviation folks and the Broward County maritime folks to make it a smooth transition. And not to put fault on anybody in my hometown, but now we go over to San Diego, where, San Diego was also a huge port of infected vessels, of crew changes. In fact, there's still 2 cruise ships sitting off the coast of San Diego right now who haven't gone back to Barbados or one of the other home flag nations where the ships had returned to. Is that communication wasn't there. It hadn't been established. So, our San Diego airport partners in the airport space at Lindbergh Field all of a sudden now have infected passengers and crew members and dealing with the issues that we faced from CBP. CBP, luckily in San Diego, CBP at the cruise terminal is dispatched out of the same office as those who serve the international terminal. So they were able to be well coordinated, but to not have the maritime and the aviation, and again, nobody's fault, but we didn't think about it at the time. Like, is this cruise ship affected really going to have an impact on San Diego Airport? It wasn't even a thought. Unfortunately, it wasn't a thought. So one of the initiatives, I know that in San Diego, in fact, I'm an active member of InfraGard in San Diego. So one of the initiatives that I want to take is to really build that communication. Just because the initiative to build the communication not only with the government, but with us as people within the same industry, competitors, if you will. And if we can come together and sit down and say, okay, look, let's build these kind of like what we learned out of the 9/11 Commission. Let's build these groups to have this communication to get ahead of this. And if it doesn't affect you, then it doesn't affect you. You're just in the know. But moving forward, definitely one of the initiatives is to establish smaller groups of communication with heads of each department in the major cities where we're going to have the big maritime and aviation operations, so that we can bridge that gap with not only those in our same sectors, but those who are, outside affected, our transportation, our busing companies, even Uber and Lyft, played a big role. And then bringing that into the federal government and getting CDC and CBP and all the, alphabet soup together to really be able to put something good to move forward. The initial question, we were kind of blessed in a way, is during the hurricanes of the last few years. Obviously, we have a very large footprint in the contract security, especially here in North America, and we get hit hard by the hurricanes in the southeast, and we had major deployments all the way from the Panhandle and southern Florida, redeployed and followed the hurricane into Houston, Texas, up to Washington, D.C. And we were actively sending our personnel, even down to the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, where we have operations, redeploying our personnel at a last minute's notice to try and establish a sense of security, a sense of safety. And because that was in our recent playbook, when COVID hit, luckily our CEO saw the writing on the wall and immediately formed a private sector internal task force, if you will, on how he was going to address COVID. So right off the bat, we had a task where we had people who were both medically trained, and human resources was involved, and he immediately started looking for other PPE. We didn't think, because at the time we were being told don't wear a mask, right? And now it's the law, you have to wear the mask. So, early on, he had the insight and started placing orders for not only the medical grade, but the cloth masks to get us ahead of the curve. So when the CARES Act came down and airports, when they saw the money from FEMA and the ability to roll that out, we didn't necessarily want to be a burden on the critical infrastructure. We wanted to be as least of a burden on the critical infrastructure as possible, and still being able to deploy out. And then of course, one of the other big initiatives that we're all involved in is looking to technology, and how can technology help us? Because as the captain said, is you lose one police officer now who was exposed to him.
Right.
If we can look moving forward, we're in the man guarding company, or in man guarding business, so I'm not trying to take away man guarding hours from, but at the same time, is the technology to do it smarter, not harder, if you will.
Very interesting, Rob. Thank you. And I, after doing a few of these, I love to see common threads. And one of the things that worked for a lot of people early on was putting together that task force that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And they all seem to have the same talent, so to speak. Someone from legal, someone from HR, someone with health and human services. So thanks for bringing that up again. That was really interesting how you see that in all different sectors. Okay,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. Okay. Let's move on to our next question. And Rob, you talked quite a bit to this in the last answer. So let me start with you and see if you have anything that you want to add about any special partnerships that you made or had to make in order to still meet your mission when COVID hit.
Well, in the aviation space, obviously, it was ensuring that we had, daily contact with our clients as much as possible, which is the airport operators, airport police, your CBP, and especially your TSA. Because TSA is charged with ensuring that regulation is maintained and that the security program remains in force. But the key partnerships were not only in the security realm and the airport ops, but it was other vendors who service the airport. Who is able to assist on different activities as things go on, trying to open that communication. CBP was a huge one because at the time, especially up in New York, we have a footprint up at JFK and LaGuardia. You had the change in the global entry, and there was a change in the processing of those who were coming through the airport from foreign. We had the change in who could or could not come into the country from different countries. So when a lot of that was happening, and I'm sure David has a huge Miami International has a huge international footprint on it, but there was initially quite a sense of chaos to a certain extent on who was responsible for what was the actual rule at the moment, and who was responsible for enforcing it, and how did CBP's decision to do something affect one way or the other. The FAA gets involved, and the FAA has a different mindset and a different mission than what the TSA has, post 9/11. And the TSA is looking at the security. The FAA is trying to maintain the safety of the airlines and the people within the airport, but all the regulation still has to be adhered to. So I would say, definitely, it's the ones who have the ability to call the shots. Like I said initially, get together, have that high-end conversation, and keep the conversation line open.
Hey, Rob, this is Tom. How about certainly coordinating across federal agencies is always interesting. How about with the private sector? Did you guys end up forming partnerships at all ad hoc with your supply chain or with other partners in the business that got you through or helped you solve or address issues that you just maybe couldn't have done on your own?
You know what? That's a great question. And I'll tell you, one of the most heavily affected were our small business and minority business partners that we utilize in these contracts to perform services. With the footprint that we have on a majority of the larger like CADX airports that we service, the ability to backfill was a lot easier for us with the larger footprint, whereas some of our disenfranchised small business, minority business partners, they get a few of their staff with COVID, or they don't have a certain training, or they don't have a certain access, and all of a sudden now we lost an entire sector of that. So, and this kind of goes back into the initiative. This is kind of, in addition to the political nature that we're in right now, what's been going on in society, and the call to social justice, this has been one more factor towards that push to ensure that we are building these better relationships with, especially our small business partners in the industry.
Yeah, I know a lot of those small across multiple sectors. These small companies, they can't go 2 months without revenue, right? You got 6, 8, 25 people, 30 people, 50 people. You take them offline for 2 months or whatever, they're gone. It's really, really a big problem facing state and local around in our country, around our nation.
And on the private sector, to that point, is the most difficult thing for a small business, who, especially being a subcontractor on a government contract, is being able to make payroll, being able to pay the bills, keep the lights on, because a lot of them have small brick and mortars. So, we did take initiative to ensure that we made it a priority that our small business partners, that we were maintaining, that they were going to be first to pay when it came to the different bills. And doing that, while you're juggling, 2 of your international airlines going, Chapter 11, Chapter 7.
Wow.
Internationally, Chapter 15. A lot of our suppliers, vendors, we had to come back to the table because they wanted to change terms from net 15 and net 30 to net 45, net 60.
Yeah.
So on all different levels, we've definitely had to keep lines of communication and build key partnerships to work together. And not want to say rob Peter to pay Paul, but in a sense,
That's about what it is.
All right. Hey, David, how about you? Can you tell us about some key partnerships that you had to make to stay mission ready?
Well, one of the issues, believe it or not, that we've had here recently is we've had some homeless population try to find refuge at the airport.
Oh, right.
And what happens is, while the immediate response is to have them, just direct them off property, it just becomes a revolving door and an almost a daily practice, right? So we tell them to leave, they're back in a few hours, or they leave the next day. So one of the things is we're definitely interested in having at least a short-term solution, so we wouldn't be in that revolving door on a daily basis or on a nightly basis. So we reached out, our assistant director reached out to our homeless trust, and through collaboration through them, they were able to get them short-term, almost for, I want to say, if not all of them, I would say a lot of the people that we kept seeing every day, at least getting them temporary shelter where they would be safe and we wouldn't just be dealing with it on a daily basis. And that's worked out well, because it was just becoming it was almost a daily practice at this point. And our Miami-Dade County Homeless Trust, they do such great work. They basically organize and basically direct our homeless plan here in Miami-Dade County. So, them being able to facilitate that really took a potential daily problem and helped us take care of it right away.
David, were you talking 5, 6, 8, 10? Are you talking 100 or 200? Any scale that?
It was between 25 and 30 on a nightly basis. Yeah. So, not huge, but substantial enough to, and remember, so when you're dealing with this on a daily basis, you have to deploy resources.
Yeah.
Those are resources that could be doing other things, that are not dealing with this. And then, you have to ensure that they get off the property safely. And so, yeah, it was pretty substantial. I would say around 30 people a night.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Thanks.
David, are those the similar numbers to pre-COVID, or did it increase significantly?
You have your regulars, right? So, we have our regulars, people that we know by name. But definitely, yes, COVID increased the number. I couldn't tell you exactly how much, but there was definitely, I would say at least twofold, probably.
Okay. All right. Thank you, David. Captain Chase, what about you? What are some key partnerships that you made during this past few months?
So the biggest ones for us here in law enforcement was working with our county EMS, emergency medical director, and also the lead health officer for the Tri-County area here in the Portland metropolitan area, which, in law enforcement, we don't traditionally deal with the medical side of things, but one of the things that obviously, everybody saw this as it was evolving is, the information was changing, not just like on a daily basis, but it seemed like it was changing almost on an hourly basis. And so just how we should be responding, how we should be protecting our community, but how we should be protecting our staff as well. We really utilized and built partnerships with the medical professionals in the county and in the Tri-County area, and also kind of leveraged the already existing partnerships we had with other law enforcement leaders. Because for us, what we really were trying to strive for is a consistent message. So instead of, we're doing it one way, the fire department's doing it another way, and this police department says this. And so we wanted to make sure that we were, one, not letting kind of just rumors or misinformation, continue to circulate through all of the different agencies. We wanted to make sure that we were providing a consistent message. And so very early on, we were pulling together large scale meetings, and this was back in late February, early March, when the first case hit up in Seattle in the United States. And then we quickly learned that what we were doing by meeting in these meeting rooms with like 30 of us all sitting all close together around this table was probably a bad idea. So we moved those to a virtual meeting like we're doing now. But that's how quickly it evolved, and we just didn't really know what we didn't know at the time. But very early on, trying to just think non-traditional relationships and move outside of what your traditional comfort zone is and who you normally think that you would work with. Look to those other resources and build those partnerships and try to be consistent. And also with, for us, with the local political leaders, who are our local politicians that, that can help us advocate for us, on a political level to get us the supplies that we need to be able to get, the response that we need and to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction. So, it was good for us to be able to go to meetings with, representation from the governor's office or, the mayors and things like that, county council and city council. So those were really important relationships to, sometimes you have those relationships or they're kind of casual, but it was really important for us early on to strengthen those relationships and then to reach out kind of beyond what our normal group is and try to expand that network, get everybody on the same page. So.
Thank you. Has what's been
Laura,
going on in Portland impacted you at the airport at all?
What was that?
Has what been going on in Portland impacted you at your airport?
So it's impacted us in the police department because of our intergovernmental agreements that we have and our mutual aid agreements that we have with the city of Portland. So we have responded, and I think what you're talking about is what everybody's seeing Portland on the national news day in, day out, and actually being talked about on Capitol Hill right now. So, but yeah, for us, we've had to kind of limit our participation because we are, we're a medium-sized agency in the state of Oregon. But for us, our resources are so limited that we're going on, 70 straight days downtown. And so it's hard for us to continue to be able to support that. So it's been a balancing act, and we go when we can go, and we help when we can help. But yeah, there's been some impact to us. And so, and it's just one more thing that we're kind of keeping, an eye on and an ear on, but keeping up those relationships with our other metro area law enforcement agencies.
A lot going on. Thanks, Captain Chase. Okay, let's move on to our next question. And David, we'll start with you if that's okay. What are some innovations and solutions you implemented or even just thought about to developing a more resilient service for your customers?
So, although we've been at a reduced capacity now for a while, for a couple of months, we have remained fully operational throughout the whole time. So, again, not to be redundant, but our main focus was to maintain all of our critical functions. And I like to use, for example, our credentialing, right? So credentialing is a critical function for any airport. So, we had to do things a little different because credentialing is a small space with a lot of humans sitting next to each other and taking care of other humans. So we couldn't do it that way anymore. We divided the staff in half. One half worked 1 week, the other half worked the other week. We ensured, again, with that enforcement, make sure everybody is well away from each other while they were at work, processing people, making sure we had all those plexiglasses in place when they were dealing with everyone else. So that would be some of the solutions. And luckily, for us, when you have that kind of space, and these are people that handle a technical job, right? The credentialing process, the CITA process is very technical, and it has certain steps that have to be followed and certain things that have to be, certain boxes that have to be checked. Well, we can't afford to lose 4 or 5 people in that office. So we really had to jump on it immediately and ensure that we were keeping them safe and keeping the office open. And with that said, there's been other issues that have derived from that. For example, so you have thousands of airport workers that are furloughed. Well, those are all credentialed people that have badges that expire. Well, there's certain things that happen when your credentials expire. You're supposed to renew them on time. So if you don't, so because of that, there had to be amendments made, and we had to work with our federal partners, understanding that, okay, we can't do business as usual because of the pandemic. So, and obviously we've had great partnerships with all the federal agencies, but we were able to find a way to, even made an amendment to our airport security plan as far as credentialing was concerned, that all those expirations were not be handled like we would handle them usually, right? And whoever was furloughed, we were able to confiscate those credentials and keep them, right? So they're not out there. So from that standpoint, that's some things where we have to been moving with the fluid situation.
David, that's a big one. I mean, that's a big one. People don't understand those credentials float around. That's like money. I mean, those things are really sensitive.
And not only that, the penalties are hefty.
Yeah.
If you lose a credential, if if you don't renew it on time, and not only that, we have. I'm going to ballpark it here because I don't want to give, I don't want to say that it's exact.
Sure.
But I'm going to ballpark. We have about 30,000 credentialed people at Miami International, and that number might be even higher.
Yeah.
So, you have 5,000 people that are not working.
Yeah.
It's a lot of credentials that we need to keep track of, make sure that they're in safe hands, and that we'll be able to give back out if we return to normal.
Right.
In quickly, right? So we're all thinking it's going to be gradual, but if it's something that happens quickly and we got to get all those people back to work, then that's the next challenge, right?
So that gave you an opportunity to exercise all the credential recovery plans you'd probably guys had written.
Absolutely, and what's big about that is having accurate information, and that your records are accurate, and that you can make easy notifications and have people, authorized signatories and people bring in the stuff. So yes, it's been challenging.
I'll bet. Wow. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Captain Chase, what about you?
So some of the innovations that we've looked at are solutions that we've implemented some things and we're looking to do some more things. But one of the big ones for us is trying to, we've moved to an online reporting system. So some of these things, they're not new, but they're just kind of sporadic and they're not really consistent throughout the industry. But I think, the law enforcement technology is going to be a booming industry. So because there's a lot of technology that's out there right now that can allow us to do things different in kind of a non-traditional way that may not have been embraced before, but now out of necessity, we're looking at those things as an industry and trying to embrace them even more. And one of them is just, online reporting. So, we can reach out to people, we can talk to them by phone. They know that they can file their police report online, and that limits our interaction and our exposure to the public. So, and that's kind of what we're trying to do is limit our officers' exposure as much as possible. And even with our local criminal justice system, with the court system, they're moving to more, virtual court hearings and things like that. Our officers are able to give testimony now through Zoom and things like that. So, so that's been, you know, some of the stuff that we've looked at in our region and here in the metro area. And then also just looking back at our IGAs, our intergovernmental agreements, and, you know, kind of recognizing where we've had, you know, envisioned most scenarios other than a pandemic. So, and how do we interact and how do we provide mutual aid during a pandemic? So we've gone back and looked at some of those things and trying to figure out more creative solutions. If, you know, if our neighboring agency has a case where they get, you know, 10 to 15 people that are infected or exposed and need to be quarantined, are we able to provide mutual aid assistance, and how does that work? And do we have those agreements in place? And Portland's right on the border of Oregon and Washington. And so we have that, you know, across the state lines interoperability that we have to look at as well. And so just working with, you know, with the officials in Washington State and in Oregon to make sure that, you know, because my law enforcement certification does not allow me to take law enforcement action across state lines. So there's some paperwork that has to be done, and some, you know, and some pre-planning that needs to be done there. So we've done some of those things, but it was never really addressed for like a long-term type situation and how we could do that and support each other. So we're really looking at making those a little more robust and just trying to think of, you know, more situations where those could come into play.
Great answer. You've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
Hey, Rob, how about you?
I would say, yeah, you know, number one is the innovation and the implementation of, you know, putting the gas on this virtual meetings. You know, Zoom and Google came up with something, and now you have Microsoft Teams, and it really it forced technology due to COVID into the fact that we can make this virtual thing work, and we really advanced the ability to put out pertinent information in a timely fashion. Of course, you know, I can't take credit for Zoom, but having the ability to build the network and push things out as they occurred. You know, one of the innovative things that we did immediately is we started changing our focus from, you know, the hardline security professional to more of a security ambassador, because we realized that with the change of scope, things were going to have to be done to, you know, and then of course, when the social injustice and the protests started up, then it became more and more evident that we're in the right direction. That's the way that we're going. So we rolled out extensive training and the ability to dispatch somebody out specially trained to deal strictly with the COVID, but also serve as a security professional at the same time. I will say, you know, one of the big something we implemented, I think it kind of goes back to the last question, that we kind of take for granted. You know, we're members of these organizations, and we go to seminars, and, you know, we go to the annual conference, and we all have a good time. I think this really brought home how important those relationships and how those organizations are. Like, I'll tell you what, CISA right off the bat, you know, critical infrastructure started putting out heat maps. They started putting out how to get a hold of FEMA. They had an amazing response. InfraGard was huge. The FBI's Office of Private Sector really brought everyone together and started posting, you know, information that we needed at the time. You know, NASCO, which is a security organization, were helping us specifically deal with that. But then coming over to the aviation space, ACI and AAAE, they really stepped it up. They started doing daily and then every other day and weekly calls, where not only from how are we going to deal with this in an airport space, but they brought on those heavy hitters from TSA to be able to speak to us all in one forum, you know, obviously through Zoom and through the ability to communicate. But it's really put a focus on moving forward to be resilient is, you know, it goes back to my last two answers, is building those bridges and really taking advantage of the fact that it's not just an annual fee and an annual conference in Washington, D.C., that these organizations actually serve a purpose that I think was invaluable in a response to all this.
It's funny you say that, Rob. One of the things that became evident, we spent a lot of time working with critical infrastructure owners and operators, and, you know, COVID was something no one had really planned on. You know, nothing, critical infrastructure wasn't hurt, but there's no people you got no critical infrastructure, right? So it was this human element. And of course, human element is built on relationship and trust, exactly what you said, right? If those people don't know each other, how in the world can they do that? And this has opened people's eyes on a lot of capabilities they didn't really have, to your point. Those things we used to do, we took for granted, now become the nucleus to the whole thing working, right? I totally get your answer. That's exactly right. And people that didn't have them really felt the pinch, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the human, as we spoke of earlier, there's so many things that are driven by emotion. With the human factor into all of this is, trying to find that, trying to get into in between whatever the media's agenda is here or there to get messages across.
Right.
But that's why I like those smaller networks where we were able to really kind of reach out. But then we also went to the major networks. I mean, our CEO here in Los Angeles, he got onto KTLA and CBS and sent the message out there that, hey, look, we understand everyone's scared right now. We don't know what's going on. We're still here. We're still focused, and we're still going to continue to deliver this because people are worried about nobody's at my business. Is security still going to show up? Are they still going to protect? Are they going to help me enforce this? Are we going to have that real partnership? And secondfold, it was to let people know that, hey, we're still hiring. We have a lot of spots. We're one of the few industries that we still need people. So it was the ability to get that message out any way we could.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, let's move on to question 5, and then we have just one more after this. Hey, David, how are you planning for the weeks ahead, both inside your organization and in the services that you provide to your customers?
So one of the things that obviously is being done right now is trying to find some positivity out of the situation, right? So we had a lot of projects coming up that we've expedited and escalated immediately as far as repairs, upgrades, construction. Right now that there is no volume that the volume is heavily reduced. So it's not going to create much of an impact, but it'll help us down the road when we do go back to normal. Then it'll be done and behind us, and we can almost hit the ground running, right? So we've been doing that. As far as, it's so hard trying to forecast or project anything at this point. It's at first this was changing daily. Okay, so now it's slowed down a little bit, but there's such a lack of consensus on what the future holds. And first it was everything's going to be back to normal in the summer. Then it was December. Now it's next May when the vaccine comes out. So there's such a high level of uncertainty that it makes it almost impossible to try to project and try to plan ahead, right? Even though we're all trying to do it and we're all trying to guess at this point. But we're working on that, and obviously the financial impact is how much longer is this sustainable? There's just so many unanswered questions, and those are the things that we need to keep pondering and keep trying to figure out how to minimize and how to remain fluid moving forward.
Are you seeing any spike in passengers at all, or has it just been status quo for the past?
We had a little bit of a spike right around when we reopened, and it was for about 2 weeks. And then boom, it dropped again. So it was good for a very short period of time, but now it's gone back down. Still better than March, right? We're not at the end of March, early April, but we are so far away from even half of what we're used to.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, David. How about you, Captain Chase? What's next for you?
Yeah, kind of what David said. I mean, we've seen some recovery. The worst of it was, obviously back in March when, there was a day where I think our total incoming and outgoing passenger count was under 1,000 for the day. And so, I mean, and you're looking at that going, how do we even keep the lights on?
Right.
But our planning, and we've recovered from that significantly, and we've kind of plateaued again, but we're not back to even half of what we were, prior to March. But I think for us in our planning, what we've done, just because there are so many unknowns with this, and it's so unprecedented dealing with a pandemic like this, and the information is continually changing. It's, we don't know what to expect, and we can't, there's really no predictors there for how to deal with this. So what we've done is try to, in our planning meetings and talking strategically about moving forward, is just having multiple options on the table. So they're available to us. Should, scenario A hit, we can kind of adapt to that, and just trying to look at different options depending on, we have a phased reopening plan in Oregon. And so, the governor has talked about what phase 1 reopening looks like in phase 2, 3, and 4. And so we take those phases and look, okay, if we can get to this, what does that look like for us, right? If we can get to phase 3, how do we fit that into our operation? So we've looked at those things, and then we've also taken, because we know that those really aren't written in stone either. And what we've seen already is that, okay, well, this county is in phase 2, but we're gonna let them go. They'll stay in phase 2, but with modifications, right? So, so we've kind of tried to just figure out in our own planning sessions and in our own minds, like what some different hybrids would look like to those things. So, and it's, it's been challenging for us. And one of the big things for us that we really want is we're looking at the best options for us to be able to get back to a more public facing, more public visibility for our police officers to be able to be out there and engage with the public safely, and to have that personal contact with the public again. So those are some of the things that we're looking at and what we're planning for.
Are you still running any exercises at the airport?
We haven't been running exercises. We had an EOC stood up until about 2 weeks ago that was directly related to the pandemic. So, so we kind of had an opportunity to run an EOC and move people through some different positions there, different representatives from the groups, because it ran for several months. And so we used that, as kind of a dual purpose. One, it was a chance for us to use it as a live exercise, but also to kind of have some central planning and stuff going on relative to the pandemic. So, but that's one of the things that we're looking at now is there's just some things that we have to do. There's some training that we need to do. There's some in-person stuff we need to do. And we're taking advantage of some of these lower passenger counts and some of the empty space that we now have around the airport to get in some of these live scenarios and things. So, and we're undergoing huge construction out here in Portland right now. We're rebuilding our entire terminal out here at PDX. So the timetable and on the construction has been pushed up significantly because a lot of the timetables were set based on, high passenger volumes and when they could get into certain areas and when, summer travel hits and, and this is, over a 5-year period. Well, right now it's, hey, get in there and get what you can get done now because there's no there. So, and we're kind of trying to look at the same thing now. We've learned enough about, I think, some of the safety measures we can do, right? We can wear the masks and we can distance and do some of those things. And so now we've got some bigger areas to work with. And so we're looking at training and live exercises and things like that we can do while also implementing those health and safety measures as well. So just trying to take advantage of the situation.
Okay, thanks so much. Hey, Rob, what about you? What's next for you at Allied?
Well, internally, a lot of it has to do with HR. We're taking a look at our employees and really investing in them because they really stepped up to the plate for us during the pandemic and everything that's gone on. I think internally, the playbook that we're trying to improve upon, which everybody is taking, the playbook that we had from the hurricane response and then now putting it together with the COVID and then the social protests and then trying to make it into one worst case scenario book. I mean, who would have thought? I mean, we just saw in Lebanon, you know, that the tragedy of in the middle of COVID and in the middle of you know, economic downturn, to see such a tragic event happen. And I think this is planning. It's all about planning, and that's what we're recognizing now, is that, you know, we have to plan. You know, we have to plan. We have to constantly train. You know, investing in our people. We've done some things to try and get. At first, we were having to compete with the federal government because people are, you know, making the decision of, well, you know, 600 a week plus my state. You know, is it do I go to work or do I stay home and take care of the family? You have the homeschooling, so there's obviously the focus on the home. So we've been having to compete with all different types of outside influence to make it internal. I know that, you know, we looked at a program we've boosted for our line workers, the 401k program, added extra incentive to that, added the perks programs. You know, especially the fact that the 600 just went away. We have a very aggressive recruiting plan. So what we're trying to do is put it back into the people that are serving our clients. So put it back into our employees and move forward. And because that's what we rely on. We're in the people business. You know, we don't make a trinket, and we don't, you know, trinkets don't walk through the airport. It's people. So we have to take a real focus on the human element and take advantages in these debriefs. You know, Captain Trace was talking about it. All the players you wouldn't even think about: the fire department, your ARF, you know, ops, the McDonald's inside Terminal 4. You know what I mean? And how did we all play into this, and how, you know, can we make this better next time? Because as students of history, we all know it's not a matter of if it's going to happen again, it's when it's going to happen again. But what is it going to be this next time? I mean, we're in 2.0, COVID 2.0, they're calling it. And luckily, we learned some stuff from COVID 1. So we've been able to put that out. Now, externally, what we're planning on is we're investing a lot into our technology right now, our partnerships, but also the training. You know, when you're in the government services and you're in government contracting, or you are the government, you know, we have critical infrastructure that has to be protected. And, you know, we were talking about, you know, David was talking about the badging. I can't get into the details of it because it's security sensitive, but we've had multiple cases of increased fraudulent badges, expired badges, and people trying to use other badges to make access into regulated facilities. This is bad. And with the passenger count being at 3 to 7% in the last month or two, you have complacency that's building in amongst the airport operators, amongst the security, amongst police officers. So our external plan is trying to take what we're investing in our people and getting them to embrace the training and the vigilant protection of the infrastructure in which, you know, we're tasked to protect.
All right, great answer, Rob. Thank you so much. And our last question deals with recommendations. So, do you have any recommendations or resources that others can use to improve their own resiliency within their own organization? So, David, if we can start with you.
You know, for just back from my military days, you know, flexibility and adaptability. I mean, those are any emergency, I don't care what it is. If you're not flexible and you're not willing or ready to adapt to whatever's thrown your way, you're not going to be very successful. As far as resources are concerned, you know, that's part of that adaptability and flexibility, right? So sometimes the answer is not going to come from the traditional source, especially when it's something that's new, unprecedented, something that we've never dealt with before. You know, now you're starting to see such a push for public-private partnerships and, you know, obviously because it's all hands on deck right now. So, you know, that just would be my only recommendation. Just keep an open mind and understand that while these new problems arise or new challenges arise, sometimes the answer is not going to be where we're accustomed to looking. So just keep an open mind and stay focused on the mission.
Well said. Thank you. Captain Chase, any last recommendations for our listeners?
You know, the big one for me that I would say is relationships. You know, have those relationships, build those relationships. You know, don't wait till something bad happens to try to figure out who you should talk to, and build them, you know, just across disciplines, right? You know, if you you know, if you work in a restaurant, you know, get to know the people that work at the airline, right? You know, the manager of McDonald's talking to, you know, a station manager from Alaska Airlines, or, you know, vice versa. I mean, I have conversations with my counterpart at the fire department. We have regular check-ins, and I'm talking about things that are related to, you know, to the police department, but I call him and ask him for feedback. In the same way with other staff, you know, I talk to just different leaders of different organizations, you know, even, you know, leadership in local school districts, and bouncing ideas off of them, and how are things that are working in other disciplines or in other types of organizations, you know, how could those be implemented in what I'm doing? So, you know, I would just recommend to people that, you know, when you're talking about what resources are available, those are going to be your best sources to find different resources as well, because as you're talking to people from different disciplines and things like that, they're going to be able to offer you resources, and they're going to be able to talk to you about things that they've used or programs that have worked for them. And so they're just a great source of information, and it's important to kind of just expand beyond what you see in front of you every day and what you're used to, what you're comfortable with, but to reach out and talk to different folks about what they're doing and how it's working for them, because things that work in a school district, you know, may work for a police department, or things that are working, you know, if one of our airlines is doing something, it may work for us as well. And I've heard the same thing where I've talked to people and they say, well, what are you doing, you know, to deal with this? And we talk to them, and they're like, wow, you know, we could take that and kind of tweak that a little bit, and that'll work for us here, you know. So yeah, I just would emphasize having really strong relationships with people in your community. And, you know, I mean, on a national level, it's great. And, you know, especially in the aviation industry, we kind of network with people all over the country and all over the world. But having those close partnerships with the people that are right there locally in your area are really important as well.
Well said, Captain. Thank you. And Rob, I'll give you the last word.
Well, I would, you know, ditto Captain Chase there. You know, and I was talking about the networking and the relationships on an earlier question. You know, the relationships that we have at the 30,000 foot level, you know, pardon the pun, but you take what you learn and you take who you know. And what I do for Allied Universal specifically is I host a monthly call. And on the monthly call, it's a monthly training call where all of my project managers and senior supervisors in my aviation footprint all dial in, and we have an updated training scenario. Well, part of that training scenario is exactly what the captain said, is you should know the name of your lead TSI, who's, you know, from TSA, who's doing your inspection. You should know who your airport security coordinator is. You should know the station managers for American Airlines, Southwest, whoever the big players in your aviation space. And not only just because, you know, of responding to, you know, COVID and any kind of pandemic, but that's security 101, is knowing the atmosphere that you're in and the environment that you're in, and being able to, we respond to anomalies, right? I mean, something's different, something's out of place, and we look into it to ensure, hey, is this guy coming through just because, you know, he wants to try and get a free sandwich, or is this guy coming through because he has a device in that bag? And we have to make those determinations. You know, the other thing I would say, my recommendation to everybody, government, I mean, I know government's regulated by it, but you'd be surprised, some of the smaller government agencies, is, you know, have that pandemic plan. Like, if you don't have a pandemic or some kind of contingency plan at this point, I mean, shame on you, especially if you're a player that, you know, has to deal with people in cross verticals. And one thing that we learned there is, and I think everybody can speak to this, is, you know, we didn't even consider when this all happened, and we start to listen to the CDC and WHO and whatever's going on this channel or that channel. But I made a joke earlier about wear masks, don't wear masks, but it's actually very serious. And taking into consideration the American with Disabilities Act with HIPAA laws, you know, one of the major conversations that we had at a senior corporate level was, you know, how does this impact, you know, the rights and the privacy of not only our employees, but the clients we're serving and the general public? So taking those measures that we were going to do and that need to be implemented, and taking into consideration that, you know, we still have to maintain our respect for diversity. We still have to comply with ADA. We still have to comply with HIPAA, and overall, just have that plan and have it detailed out. And then the last thing I would say is get involved in the organizations. Don't just be a member on the roster. Attend and get to know people, and reach out, because there's a lot of resources there that you'd be surprised, and sometimes you don't even think about it. In the aviation space, a lot of times, Safe Skies Alliance. Safe Skies Alliance is at every single operation, and what they do is they put out these plans for, hey, here airport, here's a plan if you don't know on how to mitigate active shooter, how to deal with construction security, and so we're realizing, we kind of took for granted, yeah, it's always there in our back pocket, but get out there, download the Paris panel, start reading it, read the recommendations, because, we go through so much planning, and then it's just have that plan, but have the plan on how you're going to implement it.
Great. Rob, all great advice. Thank you so much. And that's all the questions that we have. So I'd like to thank our three panelists today. Captain Chase, thank you so much. David Trinidad and Rob Wheeler. I think you're all either former military or LEO, so I have so much respect for you, not only in your past careers, but what you're doing now in your everyday jobs. Thank you for your time and being here today. Tom, my director, had to step off the webinar, but he wanted me to remind you to register with the SICE that he talked about earlier. It's a nice, safe environment to collaborate with your colleagues and peers across different industries. As you said, it's free. Just go to siceusa.org and please sign up. Now we do have about 10 minutes for some questions. So we're going to be not able to unmute mics today. So if you have a question, go ahead and either chat it to us, or you can open your Q&A window and send it that way. And I do see that we had a couple come in. So let me grab those real quick. And okay, we have a question from Max Green. Have any of you engaged in planning for EOC operations, virtually or traditional, and or a virtual or traditional family assistance center operation in the aftermath of a major aviation accident? Who wants to grab that one?
So, I mean, I can talk about that a little bit. Yeah, we, the Port of Portland at PDX, we have a lot of planning for our EOC. We have an emergency manager here that works under the public safety umbrella for the Port of Portland. She does an excellent job of coordinating our EOC operations, and then also doing some life scale exercises. And we have talked about like family assistance center operations and things like that. And so we have run some full scale exercises, and our EOC is pretty inclusive of all the stakeholders when we do stand up our EOC. So like I was saying earlier, we stood our EOC up, back in March and left it going a virtual EOC, so to speak, because nobody was coming into the actual EOC. But they were doing a couple of different things. And so, but being able to run it virtually was a good test of our ability to do that. And then also allowing all the stakeholders in the airport to come together and work in that EOC. So.
Much, Captain Chase.
Go
ahead.
And just on top of that, I mean, obviously, we don't operate our own EOC, independently. It's in the government space. It's we usually work in positions within that. But just in general, for those on the call or who are listening who aren't necessarily aviation specific, that is a huge takeaway from all of this right now, is the fact of having that EOC, having the ability to set that up. I know we've invested heavily on our side to create one that we're able to provide for our clients that don't necessarily have the ability to create that. But inside the airports and inside the maritime space, I know that, and this is where we build it up with, the Coast Guard and figuring out on the maritime side, the Coast Guard has a lot of effect on maritime in a city where, like San Diego, you could throw a rock from the water at the airport, essentially. So definitely not only the EOC planning and having the ability to roll that out as needed, virtually or in person, but ensuring who is on the panel and who's on the EOC behind those phone calls.
All All right, Rob, thank you so much. We have another question from Carolyn Bloom. She asked if you can talk about how, and Rob, you talked a little bit about the HIPAA issues, but she wants to know about the ADA issues and how they have changed since COVID. Anyone wants to grab that question?
Well, I mean, I guess, you know, diversify. I haven't really seen that in the airport space so much, but you know, with the different campuses and diversity of properties that you know we have a footprint on, it has become an issue, and it has become a conversation that we've had to have with not only externally some of the properties, because you know certain accesses. One of the COVID responses was to limit your traffic to, you know, a door or two here, or to monitor who's coming in and out, and sometimes not even thinking about it. Maybe the one that was locked was the ADA ramp, you know, so now we don't have certain wheelchair access, which, you know, could, you know, pose a fire hazard. So these conversations are happening. I don't have anything specific on the aviation space, but it's definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration.
Sure. Okay. I think we just had one comment, so let me just check this real quick. All right, no problem. That was just a comment to thank the panelists, and it looks like that's all the questions that we had today. So I wanted to say thank you again to our 3 panelists for your time today, and also thanks to the listeners. I hope that you got some information that was helpful to you in your everyday jobs. And the All Hazards Consortium runs these virtual discussions almost weekly. Our next one isn't until August 26th, which is where we'll have 2 states, Maryland and Virginia, or Maryland and Pennsylvania, bring in a partner and talk about how the private sector partner relationship has changed since COVID. So we'll send a link. You're on our mailing list. We'll send a link to you. We hope that you join us for that. And I also wanted to give you my email address, which is laura.johnson@ahcusa.org, in case you either have questions, thoughts, comments, or would like to propose a virtual discussion of your own. So that's all for our webinar. Thanks again to our panelists, and stay safe, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.